Good afternoon. We're going to kick our afternoon off with the next session, Facing the Climate Crisis, Protecting the Future of Food. Please welcome to the stage President of Food Tank, Danielle Nierenberg.
I am so thrilled to be here. I'm the president and co-founder of Food Tank. This is an incredible event, and I'm glad to see so many of you here. For those of you who don't know, Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization really devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food systems. And we do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. That is why I'm so excited to be here with you all during Climate Week and talk about why it's critical to support family farmers who are committed to organic, sustainable practices to protect the future of our food and agriculture systems. We have a really cool conversation planned in a few minutes, but right now you're going to hear from one of my very favorite people, Jeff Frank, the CEO of Organic Folly, to the stage. I'm thrilled to welcome him to the stage for a short presentation.
I'm going to take a little time here to share with you who we are first, in case some of you aren't familiar with our organization. And then from there, I'm going to take some time to tell you about some of the things we're doing that we think have a direct impact on climate. Then we've got a few minutes left at the end where Danny's going to come back out and we're going to do a little fireside chat where she can ask me a few additional questions. So let's start by talking a little bit about who we are. For those of you, again, that aren't familiar with us, we are headquartered in Lafarge, Wisconsin. If you've not heard of that, I can understand why. It's about 700 people in southwest Wisconsin, an area of the country called the Driftless region. Absolutely beautiful if you've not been there. We are a farmer-owned cooperative, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And we do just about $1.5 billion in sales every year. And so, part of why I bring that up is I think sometimes in the world of climate, big can seem bad. And in our case, we are a fairly large organization, but we think we're doing some really pioneering and great things. The other thing that's really important about us is we are a cooperative. And I know in some circles that business model maybe gets a little bit of a bad rap, that it's antiquated or maybe not contemporary in today's times. But again, I will tell you, and we're going to share through the course of our time together here, some of the pioneering things that we're doing where we think it's actually still a very viable business model and in fact working very well for our organization. So, that's all the good news, but the bad news is that there are a lot of challenges facing our farmers today. And we believe that we've just got to hit a lot of those things head on. The truth is that when you look at pastures like this and family scale farming, there are some pretty major things that we've got to be thinking about if this is going to be a sustainable way of life into the future. And why this is also important is we've heard all morning and frankly throughout this week thus far about all the great ideas that so many people have in terms of how we can continue to work on the climate crisis. But part of what I'm here to do is make sure that we ground a lot of that back with the farmer that actually has to implement these practices. These are the people that are really working boots on the ground, mud on the boots, that are actually doing these things day in and day out. And we can't ever forget what they're doing out there to make sure that all these practices really come to life. And in fact, if we look at this, there's a couple of things that are probably the biggest challenges that we see. One is that we've got an aging farmer population right now, approaching 60 years old. Many of them are looking at retirement options. Some of them don't have succession plans in their own families in terms of ways that they can pass the farm on to someone else. And unfortunately, in many cases, that means that they're basically just selling the farm. And as a matter of fact, you can see the statistic here. In the time from 2017 to 2022, we lost 140,000 family-scale farms in the United States. And why does that matter? Why is that important? There's actually, beyond the food aspect of it, there's actually a societal aspect of it that really matters. If you think about the rural America and the fabric of rural America, these family-scale farms are critically important. When they continue to go out and when they fail, what we start to see is that the main streets in those rural communities fail. The school systems start to fail. Drug problems start to increase. And in fact, I just heard Secretary Vilsack say in a recent presentation that it's actually a matter of national security because that's where the majority of our armed forces come from, these rural communities. And so there's the food aspect of good, wholesome, organic, nutritious food that's being made on these farms, but then there's also this societal aspect that's really important, and we can't lose sight of that either. And so as we look forward, we really start to think about protecting where our food comes from. We all know that we can go to the grocery store and find that food, but it's really important for us to think about how do we protect where it's actually coming from? How do we make sure those farms can actually sustain? And how do we make sure that they can continue to do the things that are so important to all of us? And the truth is they do need our help. And so one of the ways we do that is we try and create a really stable price for farmers. You can see in this chart, the red line actually represents conventional milk price since the 1980s. And you can see that's a very volatile line. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to really stabilize that price so farmers can plan ahead and know what their income is going to be, because there's a lot of expenses in running a farm. And the way that we can do that is we've got a really powerful brand that really stands behind this story with Organic Valley. And consumers know that we stand behind small organic family farms, and as a result of that, they're willing to invest in our brand for the bigger impact that it's having. The other thing that we're doing is we're really trying to think hard about grazing and carbon sequestration. Now, in general, organic dairy farms tend to be about a quarter better, 25% better than dairy on average when you think of greenhouse gas emissions and carbon. And what we're trying to do, though, is not just settle for the fact that we're already pretty good. We're trying to say, how do we get even better? Because at the end of the day, we know that consumers do love these products. They want these products, but they also care about the impact that they're having on the earth. And so by starting with family scale agriculture and then continuing to help them get even better, we feel like we really are trying to make a difference in the world around us. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is we pioneered this carbon insetting program. So in an environment today where we've got a lot of different organizations that are buying carbon offsets to try and make their own carbon footprint look better, what we're doing is we're actually helping our farmers fund climate smart initiatives on their own farms. And so they're not selling rights to someone else. They're not selling some intangible to someone else. What they're doing is they're actually investing in things on their own property to help with the climate situation. And so some examples of that are smarter manure practices and composting. We do agroforestry projects. We do renewable energy projects like solar and that kind of thing. And so ultimately what we're helping these family scale farms do is to continue to drive improvements in their overall footprint on the global scale. So we've set some pretty aggressive goals for the next 5 years. What we've basically said is we want to focus on 65,000 tons of carbon reduced across our farming network. We think that's going to take about 1,200 practices or 1,200 of these projects that we need to implement across 500 of our farms across about 28 states. And so, you know, we heard from some of the speakers this morning, this is hard work, right? And it's new. And so what's partially happening is it's been a little slower startup than we anticipated. But now we're starting to see some acceleration. We're starting to see people really get into these projects and really adopt what they have to offer. And so we are still feeling very confident that we're going to be able to deliver against these goals moving forward and do our part to sort of change the narrative about dairy and the dairy business. The other thing that's really important here is the helping the farmers pay for this. And the reason that's important is because the economics on family scale farms are tough. And we know that, but I think we all have a vested interest in keeping them around for all the reasons I've already mentioned. And so by creating this partnership with farms to help do the right thing, but then help them fund it is something that we feel really strongly about. And not the least of which is what I mentioned a moment ago, that they still maintain control of their farm. They're not selling offsets to someone else. The other way that we're innovating is we're really trying to think about a climate smart workplace. And so the photo on the screen here, this is our Cashton office building in Cashton, Wisconsin. It is 100% powered by renewable energy, geothermal, wind, solar. You can see the wind and solar there in the photo. Really proud of how this building operates and how we've built it to do that kind of thing. So we're really thinking about our money where our mouth is in terms of these kinds of practices. The other thing that we're doing that's pretty unique is we're pioneering a new kind of work. And so what we all learned through the pandemic, right, is that we were able to learn some new tools and we were able to work more remotely and make it work fine. But now we're in this environment where there's a lot of blanket mandates coming out of demands, everybody come back to the office 5 days a week, and you know, we just decided to take a different path. We talked to our employees, we've got about 1,000 employees, and we said, what makes the most sense to you? And what really came out is they wanted a consistent approach, but they also wanted some element of choice in there. And you know, I grew up in a time where if my supervisors couldn't see me working, that meant I wasn't working, right? And I think that's changed now. And so we've had to get way better at writing performance goals and job expectations and making very clear what we expect by everybody by when. And by doing that, we've been able to give within a consistent framework our employee base quite a bit of flexibility to do work when it makes sense for them, assuming they're going to hit all of those goals that we have very clearly laid out. And we're now starting to model out the impact that that's having on our own carbon footprint as an organization. Being located in a rural location, as I mentioned, people are commuting in from a good distance away when we do need to be in the office. And there are times where we absolutely need to come together. There's a culture we've built, there's camaraderie, there's team building, there's collaboration. All those things absolutely still matter. But they don't necessarily matter 5 days a week from 7 to 5. And so as a result of that, we're seeing some really positive feedback. In fact, our employee engagement scores have gone up significantly. And we're also not doing this in the sacrifice of results. We're actually achieving all of our key metrics across the business as well in this environment. And so my goal today was really to just stand in front of you and say, one, it's really important to connect all of the things we're talking about back to the people that actually have to do this work. They are truly the linchpin of all of this coming to life and working. And then also to just challenge thinking a little bit around the fact that there are creative new ways to get work done, and they work really, really well. And sometimes I think we default back to the ways of before because we're hoping to get back to results of before. And I think I'm here to tell you that we're pioneering new ways, and we're absolutely still driving really positive business results as well. And so I think basically what we're up to now is to do this fireside chat. And so I'm going to invite Dani back out, and she's going to take the last few minutes that we have together here to just ask me a few more questions for all of you.
So all of these photos are real Organic Valley farms, right?
They are, yeah. Every photo I shared came from one of our farms.
It's so exciting to see these farms in action and to hear about them. Jeff, I love a good origin story, and so I'm hoping you can talk about your journey to CEO of Organic Valley. Why Organic Valley for you?
Yeah, so you know, I spent 25 years working at Hormel Foods and wasn't really looking for a new job at the moment, but I got a call one day, and it was someone that was working on the recruitment of this role. And the Organic Valley brand had been a brand that my family and I had used for a really long time. And literally, the true story is one day I was having a bowl of cereal, and we had bought sort of a lot of the organic brands interchangeably. And I read the milk carton, and I remember telling my wife, like, this is a different kind of brand. They're doing something different and better. And from that point on, we had become really loyal to the brand. And so when I got the call, it piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And that led to a second call and a third call and a fourth call. And I remember the day where all of a sudden I was more excited about doing this than what I had been doing before. And
That's
so
great.
that's the story that brought me here about 2 years ago.
That's the perfect kind of job. I also know you've been visiting a lot of these farms lately. Can you talk about some of those visits? And you know, you were talking about the rural crisis we're seeing across America.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from farmers?
Yeah, they're concerned about it, right? Because it is their community and it is their livelihood. And you know, I think part of why I spend so much time in the countryside is because I think it really does inform my decision making.
Yeah.
It would be really hard for me to sit in the office and think that I understand what's really happening and what they're really experiencing. And I'll also tell you, we've got several regions across the country, as you can imagine, and they all have different challenges and different personalities and different things that they're focused on. And so by spending so much time by engaging with them, I really feel like it informs better decision making for us back at HQ.
Yeah, I think that's central to any company, or a good company at least. What are you hearing from farmers about the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. There are definitely some that are concerned, if we're honest, like, ugh, you're going to give me more things to do on the farm, and I'm barely making ends meet right now, and is this going to cost me more money, and you're not going to pay me more, and like, there's concern about that. But generally speaking, as a cooperative of organic farmers, they understand it, and they feel like they absolutely are doing their part. And you know, there's a lot of conversation right now around regenerative, and I love it. I love that so many people are paying attention to it. But my concern with it is everyone is defining it their own way today. And I worry that we're going to lose control of that, and consumers are going to give up on it, like some of the other labels of the recent decade, where it's just like, I don't even know what that means, so I'm not going to buy into it. And we feel pretty strongly that organic is regenerative, but not necessarily all regenerative is organic.
Can you talk about that storytelling that you have to do for both farmers to help them transition to some of the practices that are more climate friendly, and also the consumers, the people like you who are reading the back of their milk carton?
Yeah, for us, I'll start with the second part of that. For us, the brand really matters, and it's something unique to our cooperative that we have a strong brand behind it, because consumers can buy into that brand proposition and what it means, and we are very diligent around doing things that live up to our brand standard. And so that's a really important part of it, and creates that loyalty to what we're doing and the consumer recognition of it. I think, you know, part of the narrative that we're trying to tell is that these are families that are just working really hard on the land. They're doing right by the land. They care about the land. Some have been on the land for literally 100 years or more. And so for them, it's very personal. Like they don't want to lose the farm. They don't want to lose the land, and it's something that we take very seriously.
Absolutely. You talked about this earlier, but you know, farmers are aging in this country. They're aging all around the world, but especially in the United States, where you talked about there's not a succession plan for many of these farmers. At the same time, you have a whole cadre of young farmers, young folks who are really interested in farming, but face student loan debt. They face, you know, the lack of health insurance, lots of challenges. How can a company like Organic Valley help those young farmers and those, you know, those elders, those folks who've been doing this a long time, who can be mentors, connect?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I think the beginning of that is, if there is a logical succession plan in a family, that is wonderful. But even if that's the case, sometimes the legal landscape can be incredibly overwhelming, and it varies from state to state, and it can be really expensive. And so helping people navigate that is one way that we're trying to help. Another way is that we're trying to play matchmaker a little better, and there are some creative examples even within our own cooperative where, you know, it's pretty hard if you're in your 20s and maybe you already have some student debt to go to a bank and say, can you give me a loan for $2 million? I'm going to buy this farm that, you know, I don't know if it'll make it or not, kind of a thing, right? And so part of what we've done is we've tried to come up with these creative ideas, like maybe the young person buys the livestock first, then after they pay that down, then they buy the land. And after they pay that down a little, then they buy the equipment, or, you know, things like that over a series of time, if the selling farmer has the ability to do some of those things. The other thing that we're doing is there are some agencies out there that do this. There's grazing apprenticeships out there that kind of can generate people that have an interest in doing this. There's been some success with things like that. So just really trying to put all the puzzle pieces together to help in the best way we can.
Yeah, and I know organizations like the National Young Farmers Coalition, who you're close to, they're looking for that policy that will help it make it easier for farmers to transition in different ways. If they want to transition into farming, if they want to transition to more sustainable practices. One thing that I'm really concerned about, and I've seen this and I've heard this firsthand from farmers, especially in the dairy industry, is that they have these contracts with larger companies, larger than Organic Valley, and then those contracts just disappear. Where does Organic Valley come in when something like that happens?
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens a lot in the dairy industry. And you can imagine it goes in correlation with supply and demand. When milk is scarce, and especially when organic milk is scarce, people come out of the woodwork because the price is high enough that they can make a go and they can lure farmers away, and then that sounds great. Until then, those economics change, and more often than not, that business goes out of business and leaves those farms high and dry. And we have a long history of picking those farms up. And I think it goes back to this notion of having a strong brand. We feel very strongly in the demand for our brand, so that when we pick these farms up, we generally have a home for their product, what they're producing, and we can figure that out for them. But it's an unfortunate story, because on one hand, certainly you can realize while the lure of short-term additional money is very appealing, on the other hand, there is this sense of security that we bring too, because when we make business decisions, we are really making them for the long haul. We want to be here for generations to come, and sometimes that means that for the short term, we're making a different decision.
Absolutely, and we hear how risky it is to farm. Farmers are taking risks every day, not knowing what the climate's going to be like. The stability you're providing helps farmers not only make money in the short and long term, but helps them transition to some of the practices you talked about earlier. Can you dig more into that?
I can. Imagine even if you're a long-standing farmer and you need to build a new barn, or you need to, make some big investment on your property. It can be scary if you don't know if your market is going to be there. And again, you're taking debt for this and that kind of thing. And so, trying to think creatively around how we can make sure that we're supporting those folks long-term for peace of mind is really important to us. And I mean, full transparency here, we don't have it all figured out. But these are conversations that we're not only having on the business side of our cooperative, but also with our board and the other governance elements of our cooperative that is all made up of farmer members.
Right, and it's that relationship between the company, the cooperative overall, and the farmers themselves that's really integral to all of this. And I think it speaks to a need that other companies should follow. It's something that, an example that other companies should follow. Do you think that businesses that don't sort of invest in farmers like Organic Valley does will be around 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to look into that crystal ball, but I'll sort of go where I began my remarks here, and that is that we can't ever forget that the farmer is the one who has to implement these things. And so the reason I say that is, and also speaking to my comment on our cooperative model, is that our farmer owners play an enormous role in the governance of our organization. And so what that does is it really eliminates this disconnect of business people who are out of touch with what's going on the farm, or farmers who may not be in touch with what's going on in the business side, because we, in our business model, must come together and find that common ground. So as the CEO, I report to a board who are all farmer members. And so as a result of that, we can have really good and transparent conversations of the goods and the bads on both sides of that, and find the common ground to make the best decision.
And that co-creation is everything, I
really
feel like,
is.
for Organic Valley.
And it's messy. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's messy at times, but it's really important.
But it's better than guys in suits, no offense, telling farmers what to do all the time, or guys in lab coats, and it's usually guys. And so that makes me want to ask you a question. I feel like Organic Valley is really diverse in the kinds of farmers that are attracted to the cooperative model. We talked about young farmers, but you have some really cool women farmers who are part of Organic Valley. Can you talk about them?
Yeah, we've got several, and we have so many leadership opportunities through like committee work and things like that, and so many of them have stepped up and are actively participating that it just feels like the future is really bright for them. We also have really talented women on our leadership team, and so yeah, it's been fun to see, because I do think sometimes there is a very incorrect stereotype that farming is really a male business, but I'll tell you, on the farms in our cooperative, it is a whole family business, and everyone gets involved, everyone knows their role, and it's really wonderful to see it in action.
Yeah.
Just a quick story about that. We also have an egg business, and there was this moment in time where it was struggling a little bit, and we wondered, should we stay in the egg business? And what we learned from some of our farmers was it was just a great opportunity for their children to start learning about farming, to tend the chickens and care for the eggs. And so we had this great conversation of why that mattered in the family scale farming, and we ended up keeping it and solving the problem.
That's great. So Jeff, the last time I was here at the Javits Center was for the Fancy Food Show, and I was on stage with Kim Severson, who is a business reporter for the New York Times, and she focuses a lot on food. And we were talking about how Gen Z is very, very interested in the story of their food. They want to know where their food comes from, and they have a really strong BS detector. They don't want, just a happy cow on their package. They really want to know the story. And I wonder if we can go back a little bit and talk about how you reach those Gen Z consumers, those young consumers who want something different from what they've had before, what they grew up with.
Yeah, I think part of it is just being brutally authentic. And so one of the things we do is we've got this whole army of influencers that we invite in. We call it organic connection.
Right.
And we give them a really immersive experience of what we're doing. We show them farms, we introduce them to our farmers, we show them the business side, we explain what we're doing. We explain our challenges and the things that aren't going well that we're trying to work on and fix. And I think that level of transparency just really helps, because then they're out helping us tell the message, and largely their audiences fall within that demographic. But I think just being real with it, because you're right, the BS detector is high, and you're not going to pull the wool over their eyes.
No.
So don't even try. I find that if we're just real and authentic about it, it tends to go a lot further.
And that brutally authentic sort of spirit and radical transparency, how does that, when you've made a mistake or someone on your leadership team has made a mistake, how do you handle that?
Just with a lot of humility, honestly. And we're human. It happens. And I think just being honest about it, and then the so what, now what are we going to do about it, goes a really long way. And now, if you keep repeating that mistake, then that's a different story, right? But if you make one and you own up to it and you have a course correction, I think that's human.
Absolutely. And the farmers I've met with all over the world are always so transparent and brutally honest. And they are very honest about the mistakes they make every day and what they learn from them. And so I think that's something for us all to remember. As we sort of reflect on Climate Week, and there's so many people in New York City just concerned about the fate of the world, honestly, I wonder what advice you have to all of us as eaters, as the CEO of this company trying to do the right thing. What should we be doing as we make decisions about food, a couple times a day at least?
Yeah, I think the first thing is do your homework on the brands that are really trying to make a difference, because we're certainly not alone out there. There are many brands that are trying to make a legitimate difference, and I think that's a really important piece of the feedback. I think the other thing that's on my mind is making sure that we remember the farmer that's at the other end of that, because we all have a vested interest in their ability to sustain a living and to do right by the land so that it can continue to do right for us for centuries to come.
It all has to be about the farmer. It has to be farmer-centered.
It does.
So nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Please, a round of applause for him.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And happy Climate Week.